Welcome to the Empowered Catholic Podcast with Karen and Curtis Herbert, where we combine the best of theology, science, and coaching to inspire your empowerment. It's our mission to help you release the inner obstacles that are holding you back from embracing true Christian freedom, so the power of the Holy Spirit can manifest in you. So if you believe that God has more for you, if you want to believe that God has more for you, listen on, my friend. Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Catholic Podcast. That is the new name of this podcast, and we're getting used to it. We hope that you are as well. You are here with Karen and Curtis Herbert.
Hey, everybody.
And we are really wanting to share about why we changed this name and what it means. So we're having a season on empowerment. What is this?
What is that? What are we talking about?
Yeah, what's this empowered Catholic thing anyway? And we've talked a little bit about it so far. You're here with us on episode 151. So if you've been with us the past few episodes, you know that really we're just walking around this thing called empowerment, and we're describing it in many different ways so we can try to get a handle on it. And we've talked about empowerment as this thing that happens when the whole person becomes animated by the Spirit in all of their layers, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And when the obstacles that are in those areas get released, then there's this movement of the Spirit that is empowerment. We've also talked about how the human person has the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And sometimes they work really well together, and sometimes they're in conflict and they're working on different things. But when you've got the conscious mind mastering and guiding the unconscious mind, we talked about it as the elephant. And when you can guide it to support what it is you're consciously choosing, that's also empowerment.
Well, Karen, thanks for that semi-recap. I guess it was your turn.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today specifically?
Well, we want to discuss today kind of how empowerment works in terms of your neurology. So what is going on within the human mind, brain, the whole person that causes us to be empowered or disempowered? And it's really kind of a fascinating topic. So this is one of the things that gets Curtis and I going and excited and interested. So today we're going to talk about how your brain processes all the information, the amazing, unbelievable amount of information that gets thrown at you every day.
And one reason we want to talk about this is that, well, being a human, we're constructing our reality. And by that, I simply mean that everything we experience is a reconstruction of reality, right? Your brain is hanging around in this dark closet with no light. It's called a skull. And it has no idea what's going on except there's these senses. And so everything is a reconstruction of reality. And as you start to listen to this and realize how much information we just bloop over,
right?
Because we're hardwired that way. We're hardwired to skip over a lot of information. And while that's incredibly useful and important,
yes,
it also creates and we all have a little different idea of what's going on out there.
Totally. I'm sure our listeners have had an experience where, you're experiencing an event and then afterwards you talk about it and you realize, wow, we have very different perceptions of what was going on there.
Yeah, it's really true. We were talking about something the other day, Karen, and you kept saying, no. And I finally realized that you're right. We had not been to that event. We had watched a video of it. But the next day, we had met somebody at a venue a lot like that, and my mind had conflated those ideas.
Oh, you connected them.
It's sort of like watching a foreign film with subtitles.
Yeah.
Maybe when you remember it, you don't remember the subtitles.
You forget that it was in a different language. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I have read that actually every second you've got about 2 million bits of information coming at your senses. And there's just no way you can process all of that information. You just can't take it all in. So your brain has to, as you said, do a little reconstructing. And you really only process about 126 bits of all of that 2 million. So there's a lot that's going on to manage this information. A lot of it gets deleted, distorted, or generalized as it's taken in, and then you're fitting it into how you've constructed reality so that it means something to you and you know how you're supposed to respond.
Yeah, like they talk about the cocktail effect. So if you're in a large crowd and you're just maybe strolling along and shopping or something, and somebody calls your name, not that loud even, all of a sudden, boom, you hear that.
Yes, because that's something that you've trained yourself to focus on when it's coming. Yeah. Yeah, I've had one of those experiences where, like you said, you're in the crowded place, but then I'm in this really engrossing conversation and I just sort of tune out all the other stuff that's going on and delete all of that information because it's not what I'm telling myself to focus on.
Yeah, it's really natural. And I want to emphasize that this is really, it follows from the way your brain is put together. It's kind of a hardwiring thing. You know, we have these experiences and maybe we just don't appreciate that the way the information comes to us, that's a hardwiring kind of thing. When you're zeroed in on that conversation, it's not just you choosing to do that so much as it's the hardware taking over. Okay, so here's something that's I think a relatively simple example conceptually. It's the visual system.
Okay, throw it at me.
Yeah, and the visual system, it takes up a ridiculous amount of brain power, something like a third. And
that's just amazing to me, by the way.
It's crazy. And that the light is hitting your retina. Your retina is creating an electrical signal. So there's a transduction, and the signal, it goes into this network of neuronal connections. And as this information, this raw information, just this light hitting your retina, as it gets processed, there's a lot of little steps. Like at one point, there's a stack of neurons. It's like a column, and it just looks for a vertical line. And then there's a stack of neurons next to that, and it looks for a line that's about within 15 degrees of vertical. There's other ones that are looking for circles, and there's edge detection going on. And all of this is getting constructed into these images, these mental images, along with just, drawing the picture. There's a lot of other processing going on. For instance, if there's a face in your field of view, your brain's really going to key in on that because that's critical for us to have interactions with each other. Or if you're in a duck blind and you're looking out over the swamp, if something's moving, you're going to key in on that. And all this information, it is getting tremendously compressed. So think about, say, the retina is a bunch of roads, and they start going to a connection like a roundabout, and then one road leads out of that. And that one road leads to another roundabout where there's a bunch of other roads that are being compressed. So as you go along this chain, there's a bunch of inputs that are getting summarized into a signal, and then a bunch of that level of signals gets summarized again. And so it's summaries of summaries.
Wow. So as you summarize the summary of the summary of the summary of the summary, there's a lot that you're assuming in all that, it sounds like. There's a lot you're missing, too.
There's a lot you're missing, and there's all kinds of fun examples of psychologists do, like they have a couple people come and ask you for directions.
Yeah.
And then they arrange for somebody to walk by with a big box for a second to interrupt you. And then they'll switch people.
Who's holding the box?
No, the person asking for directions gets switched out. And often the person that's answering the question doesn't even notice.
Doesn't even notice.
Oh, this is a totally different person continuing the conversation. And it's because the brain's already got plenty of context and it's focusing in on the key information. And so when I look at your face and I'm reading your body language, I'm looking at listening to the tone of your voice, I'm connecting that with a bunch of patterns of you. I've seen you interacting in a lot of different ways, and I'm guessing at what you're experiencing. I'm guessing what your body language is telling me. And that's a very complicated process, and that relies on summaries of summaries.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say, Curtis, that when we have the information that we're processing, we're like comparing it to all sorts of past things that we think we know or experiencing, and we're kind of putting it in this box over here because we think that's where it goes?
Yeah, exactly. So again, your brain it's in this black box and nothing's going in or out except for this information. So it's getting some kind of sensory input, like a bunch of sound vibrations. And that would be totally mystifying, except that, hey, it has some experience to draw on.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going through these examples because I want people to simply appreciate that how much guesswork your brain is doing every second.
Yeah.
It's a guessing machine. We like to think of it, I think, as like maybe a camera. I'm pointing the camera out and it's assembling the information. It's telling me how things are. But that's not really a very powerful analogy. It's more like it's being impacted by this sensory input and it's guessing what's going on. It's putting out some. So here's ready for an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about this sort of thing. And these are some of her examples. She starts with, well, say you hear a loud bang. Well, you wonder, oh, wait, was that a gunshot? Or was it a firework? Was it a door in the wind? Somebody unloading lumber? It's just vibrations in the air. Your brain has to guess about what this thing is. And not only does it going to interpret that batch of vibrations as a bang, it's going to start guessing immediately, well, so what? What does it mean to me?
Do I need to get out of the way?
Yeah.
Get to safety.
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah.
So, I mean, your brain, you don't know what caused that sound. All you're receiving is the effect. And so we have to guess at the causes. And even the fact that it's a bang, it gets our attention. So somewhere we've learned that, hey, a loud noise, this is going to maybe impact my situation. I better pay attention and try to figure out what's happening, or at least it's going to alert me, because I know from experiencing loud noises in the past that, hey, this could be really important. So even before anything remotely approaching conscious thought has taken place, I've heard this loud noise and I'm calling it a bang, or I know, oh yeah, it's that thing. And here I am, I'm paying attention to it. I'm not reading my book. I'm responding to it.
So a couple of things are standing out to me, Curtis. And one is like, okay, it's a really good thing our brains do this, because what if every time you heard a noise, you had no context and you didn't know what it was and you had to learn what's going on? Like,
yeah.
I just can't imagine. I think our brains would blow up or something.
Yeah, we can't work in that situation.
We can't work in that situation. But the other thing that's coming to me is we could have like constructed a whole bunch of context and meaning and we've connected it to things, and it just doesn't fit anymore, or that needs to be questioned. And like I've heard this sort of thing where, well, you create your own reality. And I think it must be because of this, because you're assigning all of these categorical meanings to things as you're inputting the senses, and you're sort of projecting, okay, that's reality. That's what is.
Right. There is a sense where you're creating reality. Of course, things exist outside of us.
Right, exactly.
We know this, we believe this, yet we are constructing and inferring what's going on all the time. And this concept of categories is really important. We know from a lot of research that the brain likes to put things into categories. So, and these have tremendous varieties. So Feldman Barrett's example, she talks about an apple. Okay, well, an apple, it's round, it's hard, it's kind of crunchy. That might be what's going on in that category. Or you could be in the store and looking at a bunch of apples and think, well, here's some that are good for baking. Here's these others. Those are not good for baking. And all of these categories, they don't really exist outside of you. They are constructs that your brain has created to help you deal with the universe.
Yeah. So what does this round thing actually mean? And I could totally see how, you're choosing which categories are important to you and where the thing is going to go in whatever situation.
Yeah. So an analogy that's, I think, really helpful. And so let me just back up a little bit. I talked about the visual system. I talked about the bang. These are pretty simple examples, although neurologically, they're really quite complex.
Yeah.
But talking about these examples, it just shows you how important the literal networking of your brain is to that experience. And similarly, these bigger concepts, these bigger categories that are so important to us, like, is my wife happy? Is she not happy? How's my job going? Am I going to have a job next year? Am I feeling secure? All of these bigger things, how we approach them has a lot to do with the way our networks are wired.
Interesting. So I'm probably going to have a really different set of connected neurons than somebody else, would you say?
Sure.
I'm going to have my own set, and you're going to have yours, and they're not the same.
Yeah, I'm sure the networks, if we had any way of knowing how they're actually connected, I'm sure they'd look very different.
I think, actually, I vaguely remember reading this little blurb, and scientists were starting to appreciate more that people have extremely different experiences of the world around them. And they were starting to dig into, well, what's going on that's creating these different experiences for people, even of very similar events.
Yeah, and so this concept of category.
Yeah.
One good analogy is a library. So we have all these experiences, and we've put them into these little categories. So like threat, that's a big category. So books that are indexed under threat might be like a big wing of my library, potential threats. And then as the threat becomes more specific, like I hear a gunshot, then wow, okay, so now I'm looking more at maybe a shelf of books. And then as I start to bring more experiences to bear, then I'm more looking for that one book that has the experience that's dead on point to help me decide, hey, what am I going to do now?
Mm-hmm. Well, the question that's coming to me, Curtis, is, so what? What's the point in all this? And so I'm going to maybe just share my thoughts, and then you can disagree with me if you want, or share some other thoughts. But there are some things floating to the surface here for me. And one of them is appreciating that I have my own library and my own set of connections. I have my own filters that I'm processing all this information through. And the meaning that I make is not the meaning that everyone else makes. And it's not a good or bad. It's just, this is the collection of connections that we've made and life experiences and choices and values and beliefs and emotions. And it's all in there. And everybody's going to have their different set of filters, and they're going to have different meaning that they take from things. And I'm sort of thinking, like, the other thing, I think we've mentioned this before about the brain, is we want to validate ourselves. We want to validate our own meaning.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
Like, if you're in a situation and you're like, oh boy, I can't believe that person said that. That was really disrespectful. And sometimes the first thing we do is we turn to somebody else and we're like, I can't believe he said that. That was really disrespectful, wasn't it? What do you think? Because we want our meaning to be validated. And it's really hard to question our own set of filters and our own meaning that we take from someone. And we can get really protective about how we see it, what our perspective is.
Yeah, that's right, Karen. We've put all this effort into guessing at what's going on around us. We're not going to just give it up for the first person we bump into.
I worked hard for that, man. I'm sticking by it.
But it's true. It's energetically true. We have to make sense of the world, and we can't just turn it upside down every time we have a conversation with another person.
Right. And yet, the other thing I'm taking from this is that there's a really big benefit from having a little humility about all of these patterns. And I'm thinking about times in my own life or with clients, it's like, I really want X, but I'm stuck in these patterns of meaning making that aren't going to help me with X. They're going to undermine me. They're not serving me. And I'm just allowing them to kind of take over. And that's not being empowered, right? There's a sense of starting to look at those places and address my filters and my meaning making to really support me. That's more empowerment.
I like the word humility.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Emotional humility,
Yeah.
Relational humility. Maybe the way I think it is, maybe that's not really how it is. Or at least I can acknowledge, hey, other people, they can have a very different perspective.
Yeah.
And getting down to, the exact, precise reality of it, that's not so simple, perhaps. And
that may not even be the thing to do. It may not be helpful or pertinent to get down to this reality thing.
And this thing about beliefs that aren't serving us anymore, this is huge.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just hang on to it so doggedly when it's obviously not true. Yet, well, this is my experience and I'm sticking to it. And it doesn't matter if this belief is serving me or not.
Yeah.
So we can be really stubborn. And that's why, some humility is really called for. And I think there's some intellectual humility as well, simply realizing that, hey, we don't point the camera of our mind at the world around us and get the picture drawn in. This isn't like television where things just get painted for us. It's actually, the mind's a pretty quirky thing, and it does a lot of guessing, and it has all this experience kind of organized into these categories, yet they don't always make sense in a given situation because we're always having new experiences, and what's happened in the past is never going to be 100% on point for us now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think actually, as you were talking, I was thinking if I was going to pair something with humility, it would be curiosity. Like, I wonder why I took that meaning from that. I wonder why I saw this and not that.
Yeah, why did I get so wound up
Yeah.
as soon as that subject came up?
Yeah.
Well, what's up with that?
It's very curious, and having the curiosity with the humility, I think, can help us see, wow, this might be something to question. This might be something to look at more deeply. And just to take us back to what we're talking about here, we're talking about empowerment. And I believe that empowerment is owning this process in your neurology, taking responsibility for it. We're not at the mercy of everything we've already created in that black box in our skull. We actually have a lot of capacity to change and shift those patterns. And I think we just often feel like we have no control, that we're not responsible. There aren't ways to shift patterns, and there actually are. You get actually to choose which 126 bits of information you're going to take in and pay attention to. And you get to choose how you're going to evaluate that and what it's going to mean to you.
That's right, Karen. And so what? Well, we have a weekend of so what.
Oh, we do.
A weekend of hands-on. How do you do this? What does this really mean to me? How can I leverage these kinds of things to have a real transformation in my life?
Yes. If you're listening to this and being like, well, how am I supposed to do that? Then you need to sign up for one of our weekends. And we're having two. We're calling them Empowerment Leadership Weekends. And they're for anybody who's a leader in any area of life. Do you lead your family? Are you a leader in your organization, in your church, in your community? This is applicable to many different kinds of leadership. And we are getting into the skills, the techniques that allow you to make these kinds of changes. There's two weekends. There's one in February, one in April. Please go to our website, empoweredcatholics.com. And there'll be a banner there. You can click through and get all the information about the weekends. We'd love to see you there.
Thank you for being here with us this week. Visit our website at empoweredcatholics.com to learn more about us. And remember, as Pope Francis says, God comes to break open everything that keeps you closed in.